Hello everybody, here we are today talking about why the top teams in the NHL at the moment could be kind of easy to root for in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. But before we get started with that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So I know I did a video yesterday kind of talking about why there could be a lot of upsets in the first round, and that's true. But I think on the flip side of that, we can talk about how this season maybe there are a couple of teams that are towards the top of the league that might be a little bit easier to root for than in years past. You think all the time about, oh, you want the upsets, you want these better teams that maybe you're sick of seeing them win to get knocked out early. But I think that you could probably make an argument for every team currently leading their division as to why you might be okay with them having a good run in the postseason. Now, this isn't going to apply to everybody. You might not agree, and some of these teams may not end up winning their division. But some of these teams already locked up winning their division, like the Washington Capitals. Not only have they locked up the top spot in their division, they've locked up the top spot out east. So let's kind of jump in all this, starting off with the Toronto Maple Leafs. A tale as old as time. We have talked about this over and over and over again. You go to other people's channels that are 8 or 9 years old. They're going to be talking about virtually no playoff success with this group. They have gone to the playoffs every year since the 2016-17 playoffs. However, they have done pretty much nothing. They've only gone on to the second round on one occasion. They are in a period where there's just a lot of questions about this roster. With the Big Four, is this the last hurrah? And if it is, you'd like to see kind of a big push for them. More so just to say, we knew we could do it at least one time, even if that ended up being a Stanley Cup final loss, to say, guys, we at least got there and could kind of prove what we all knew all along. This is a talented side that could really be a threat come playoff time, and at least it culminated in one occasion. On top of that, too, looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, two things we'll point out here. Since the 94-95 season, there's not been a lot of major success in the playoffs, not just with this current era we're talking about. They've only gone to the conference final 2 times, the last time being 2002. So it's been kind of a good chunk of time. They are also a team that has not won the Cup in nearly 60 years. That is the longest drought in the Stanley Cup currently, or in the Stanley Cup in the NHL currently. And that is something that I'm sure they'd like to get rid of. And I know that, again, with a fan base that is as big as this, you may not want to see them win it. But at a certain point, it's like you want to see it. We think back to other sports and some of these leagues where fan base may not always be loved, but at a certain stage, you're like, it's gone on long enough and they're suffering. So Toronto is there. The next team we're going to be talking about here is the Vegas Golden Knights. Vegas is one that I think a lot of people bristle to as well, in the fact that, again, like Toronto, they just don't like them. And I get that. But I'll tell you right now, this team has maybe had a harder path compared to previous years. Maybe not so as much last year, but it's not like when they first started out where everything seemed to be going perfectly for them. And I think a big thing I would really like to point out here for Vegas is a willingness to win, a willingness to make those big decisions, to make those big trades, to give up picks, and to sign these big long-term extensions to try to keep this group together. Other teams and other organizations don't seem to be as invested in winning as Vegas is, and that's something that I would like to highlight. We talk all the time about owners not caring. The Vegas Golden Knights as an organization are probably one of the most, if not the most invested team in winning year in and year out, and not just winning a lot, winning it all. On top of that too, I think there's a lot of storylines for Vegas you could talk about here. The blue line that's played a lot of time together, just a lot of guys that have played a long time with Vegas. You could talk about some of these players that came over from other places where, again, Vegas really wanted to get them. Hurdle, talk about Hannafin, and they signed those contracts, or they were able to just get these guys previously where they wanted them to be part of a cup contending team. Other things as well too, with Bruce Cassidy. I almost said Bruce Cassidy. Bruce Cassidy, and he is one of those coaches that I think is pretty easy to root for. Boston Bruins fans probably would be disappointed if he won another cup after the Bruins moved on from him, but he wouldn't be the only thing you could root for here as well if you're looking at other teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs. Craig Berube. While it is seemingly nice that Montgomery's working out in St. Louis, if Berube would be able to say, hey, they kind of went their separate ways with me and I want another cup with another team, that'd be cool. But again, we're kind of circling away from them. Talking about Vegas, I do think that there is kind of that push, and I think as well we can talk about that in this market. This just kind of invigorates the Vegas area, the Nevada area. If this fan base isn't ecstatic after going to possibly 3 Stanley Cup finals and then winning 2 of them, I don't know how you would get them invested. So just kind of building up this early period, this first decade with this organization, trying to make it as rosy as possible. And now we talk about the Winnipeg Jets, the only Canadian organization in this video. This team is not old. Again, they kind of fall more in that category with Vegas. Not exactly, as again, their roots back to Atlanta, But this is an organization that, since they've been in Winnipeg, we've talked about it before, not a whole lot going on. They've been a pretty good regular playoff team. They have been in the NHL. This is their 14th season. They've had 13 seasons prior with 7 playoff appearances. However, no division titles. That is unfortunate. No trip to the Stanley Cup final. And you can also throw in, out of their 7 postseason appearances, they've only made it to the second round on 2 occasions. I think with this shaking up to be such an incredible year for them, where they look set to win the division, where they look set to possibly win the President's Trophy with Connor Hellebuyck, getting 45 wins and then some, this has proven to be an exceptionally good year for the organization. And I think that for a lot of the Canadian fan base, it might be easier to root for them or get behind them if you want to actually see a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup. I think they have some guys that you would probably, again, kind of get behind for that storyline. Scott Arniel, again, if you want to talk about head coaches, coming in for this side that has really big expectations during the year and taking charge and leading into possibly their first Stanley Cup would be amazing. I feel like the Jets could be one of those sleeper teams that people would be excited for, and I'm hoping that they can actually go on a run. And then we have the Washington Capitals. This one is pretty self-explanatory here too. This organization, while being good for a long time, hasn't been able to do a whole lot. They've got 1 Stanley Cup in 50 seasons. This is a organization that also kind of has fallen, I guess, in a weird spot where they haven't been able to do much in the playoffs, absolutely nothing, since 2018, where they had their last series victory. That, mind you, was their cup win. But then you think about it as well, too, from 1999 through 2024, how many times did they go to the Eastern Conference Final? 1. On 1 occasion. That's not a lot. There was a lot of first-round exits. There was a lot of second-round exits. There were some years they didn't make the playoffs. It is not something that I think a lot of people kind of take into consideration here, considering how good some of these teams were in years past. But it's not like we can look back at this and say everything went perfectly for them. 1 championship in this run is insane, especially considering some of the players they have. But I do think this is a very likable roster. Whether you look at Alex Ovechkin, the all-time goal-scoring leader, whether you look at Pierre-Luc Dubois, Dylan Strome, whether you look at some of these younger guys that are here, whether you look at their goaltending, whether you look at Spencer Carberry as their head coach, there are just a lot of reasons to be excited about what the nation's capital features in their lineup and in their management. This is a group that's been able to kind of snag some good and effective deals. This is a group that will feature some younger guys kind of entering the fold for the playoffs in all likelihood. And I do think that this could be a team that would be pretty easy to root for as we approach the playoffs, knowing maybe this is the best chance that we can see of Ovechkin ever winning his second cup, maybe the only chance. So anyway, maybe you don't actually like any of these 4 teams, but I do think that I did kind of lay out some reasons why it'd be okay to root for them. And I think what's kind of ironic here is if you look at the top 2 teams in the league, Winnipeg and Washington, they might be very, very easy to root for. So if we got to see a Winnipeg and Washington Stanley Cup battle, that would actually be really insane and cool. And I don't think anybody would kind of be upset with either one of those teams winning. So I'm hoping for their sake that there's not a lot of upsets, but that, again, is something where I'm not as invested in that regard. Whoever wins and beats them in the first round, I'll probably have a storyline where I'd say, oh, this is really good for them to win. But yeah, Winnipeg and Washington, book your 1 seeds now. Anyway, what are some teams that you feel like are pretty easy to root for that are higher seeds? Let me know down below in the comments as to why. And also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you love hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.